Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Belgian Football Podcast. My name's Scott Coyne. I'll be your host for this week's episode, and joining me, as always, to review the week in Belgian football. And it's been a very eventful week, as it always is. It's Mr. Joris Beck. Joris, you're back from your travels, and all three of us are been travelling, haven't we? I've been away for a few days to the Scottish Highlands, and I'm back now. You've been, well, I'll let you tell everybody where you've been in a second. And our Ben, who's not with us, is moving house.
Exactly, yeah. I'm traveling to the space and time continuum at the moment, by the way. I'm hoping the techniques will work out better than they sound like right now for myself. But also to the mighty football country Armenia, and that was a really lovely trip for 7 days. I can highly recommend that. It's a bit of an unusual destination, maybe, but not as unusual as it used to be, I believe, as well. But yeah, really friendly people, good food, good vibes, and just some eventful things to do there as well, challenges as well, again, adventures, but this time without jumping out of planes. Still some on height though, but so there's nice mountains there as well.
Yeah, I saw some of those photographs that you had online, and it did look very beautiful, actually. It looked really, really nice. Anyway, enough of our travels. Let's do some travelling around the Pro League because that's what everyone is really here for. We've reached Matchday 16. What happened? Well, Mechelen lost 1-0 to Standard. Dender and Westerlo finished 2 apiece. Zulte Waregem and Cercle finished 1 each. Charleroi and Raal was also a draw, albeit of the goalless variety this time. Club lost 1-0 to Antwerp. Genk won 2-1 against Leuven. Anderlecht won the Brussels derby. Not too often they do that, but they were delighted to do that. Again, they won 1-0 this past weekend, and Ghent lost 2-1 to the Canaries, to Wouter Vranckken's Sint Truiden. And that's where we're going to start this week. We did promise you all before the international break that we were going to talk about St Truiden because they were doing quite well and they've continued their fine form. So they deserve a little bit of space this week for us to expand on how they're doing. And this is quite an interesting one because regular listeners are going to be quite amused by the fact that Joris is probably going to be squirming for the next hour, delving deeper into his local rivals, local Limburg rivals. But we're going to do that because they've earned this opportunity, St Truiden. And I think a bit of a surprise package, if we're being honest, isn't it, Joris? Because they're now sitting, they're now fourth. They've won 9 of their games. They're on 30 points and they're only 6 points off the top. Now, if you'd said to most people St Truiden were going to be where they are now at the start of the season, I think people probably would have laughed at you. I remember coming into the season, we were, a little bit worried about them because there was the sense that their main man at that time, a certain Adriano Bertaccini, was going to be leaving. And sure enough, he did. He's gone to Anderlecht, as we know. And the worry was who was going to score the goals. Vrancken comes in at the end of last season, has an immediate bounce and saves them. But it's kind of just got better for them, really, isn't it? They're not conceding that many at the moment. They're quite solid. And they're actually creating a fair bit as well and arguably underachieving. If we look at their XG, which is never the most reliable stat, we always like to flag that up, but it's worth kind of throwing this in the conversation. They've scored 23, but their actual XG for what they kind of should have, and there's always a differential, is almost 30. It's 29.1. So there's a reasonable difference there. So that does tell us they're kind of creating quite a lot. I mean, you look at how much they're creating in comparison to the other sides, I think it gets even more interesting, Joris. They're actually second in terms of their XG behind Union, which is, really interesting. I was surprised to see that today. So that goes some way to explaining their good performance. They've won their last 5 as well, if you include the cup game. So there's plenty going on at the Daewoo Wasabi Stein just now, isn't there?
Definitely, and no, I promised last time that we would be talking about this. I did not know that it would be with me with that we would skip a week, but luckily they did indeed win the game against Ghent. Well, luckily for us in this format, at least to talk about them now. Yeah, that for our planning on that they won in Ghent as well now, and well, these XG stats also more or less like indeed take them with a grain of salt, but confirm still a bit our worries. They still are not scoring enough of the goals as they should, but enough to really be in the position that they are in, really deservedly as well. So like yeah, Gotto is as replacement, temporarily replacement, of course, for Bertaccini is working out really well so far. I believe he has 5 now, which is it's not a massive amount of goals, but to be fair, the whole league is not scoring as much. Like there's no out and out top scorers running away this season yet. That might still change, of course, but yeah, it's not a high scoring top scorer list, at least at the moment, in comparison to other countries and other seasons as well. I guess we could say. Yeah, and like scrolling a bit through that squad, like you can there's indeed like I can still understand our worries. Yeah, I know. I remember I was joking about Sissako, the serial relegator. I do believe we can now already say like, okay, I'll at least I have to end up my hands high. Well, he is actually playing a lot, and with him they are performing really well, and they won't get relegated by well how it's going now. Or there should many things should go wrong, not only with them but with other sides picking up a lot of points as well. That's just not going to happen. Yeah, everything looks really solid. Yeah, and yeah, still with the squad that they have, that's still quite interesting as well. With Lapoussin actually not featuring at all anymore, well, being put back into the B squad, I guess, even. And I'm presuming he will leave in the winter, or at least they will be looking for that. Whether he actually will, that's something else. Um, or another redemption might be upon us, and that might they'll even strengthen them even more. Yeah, redemption. Franken as manager is of course having himself as well. Yeah, getting back some of the status he has had built before the last few seasons as well. Also, perfect manager for and like the perfect manager for this kind of site. It seems like a bit of the underdog. He really knows how to work with that and with that narrative and let them play good football as well anyway. So like it's good that it's indeed an attractive site as well to watch. Yeah, what can we say else? Like a standout player, I guess we have actually touched on him a little bit in the over the course of the season so far. Is I guess Ryotaro Ito. For in midfield. Well, also putting in the goals at times and just being very creative as well. Well, Seba, we actually had a really good game, but he didn't score against Ghent, and he brings bringing some of the flashes he brought at Beerschot as well when he first came through. But there, he's one of the reasons maybe that the stats are lacking a little bit still, or they're a little bit behind the others. But he's at least a really fun player to watch. Very technically gifted player, of course. Yeah, Koto, like I mentioned already, scoring the goals and being important generally for a squad and yeah, at the back, surprisingly at the back, I have to admit, like with the names they have, I'm very surprised that they are doing reasonably well, not conceding as much, because yeah, by the names there's no real standout player, um or a player that they didn't change that much either there in comparison to other previous seasons. Yeah, we know Van Helden is a decent player, of course, at center back. and Taniguchi brings his experience, but like last season, it seemed more like he was past his prime than this season, which is a bit of an irony because, of course, he only got older over the time, but he's using his experience more wisely, or he did get a different role that really suits him there. So yeah, but definitely one of the informed sides. There's two of them that have won 4 or in the league and 5, then including the cup. We'll touch on the other one in a little bit as well, but let's not take away the shine of Sint Truiden for now. That's impressive, and like, indeed 6 points off the top. Yeah, we're never gonna say they're going to be a title contender, but it does look very likely that they will get into playoff in the Champions playoff. That's like they're now 8 points clear of seventh placed Gent. Who have to come back to Vrancken as well a bit, maybe 22 points now, because and that's 1 point less than they had last season under Vrancken, where he was already, well, really they were criticizing him a lot and doing very yeah, well, the board was not behind him at that point probably already anymore. Of course, that must be a sweet victory for Vanke for sure, against Gent now, to get that stat out in the world as well. But of course, going back to that, I'll nuance that a bit as well. Of course, that not only had to do with what was happening in the league, but also what was happening in Europe, where they underperformed, at least by the end of the group stage, which is right about this time, round around this time. And yeah, threw away a really good position in the Conference League, basically, in a shameful manner. That's probably one game that really cost him there. And yeah, Leko has the advantage to touch a little bit on Hint very quickly then as well. That, well, the advantage, that's between quotation marks, but that he doesn't have to play in Europe, and he can't have those results weighing in either. Of course, this can sway different ways as well, because I do believe, to touch on a small thing as well, like again, like I do believe, for example, that Torsten Fink actually is having some with having some good results in Europe, camouflaging maybe the not so good results in the league, has actually saved his position maybe longer. And maybe the waters might be calming there a little bit as well, but we won't be touching too much on his side, of course. But I think yeah, that's the case, and Europe can hamper, or it can can make it worse, can make it better. But yeah, in Franken's case, I believe he's very happy where he is right now. Yeah, and yeah, really sitting high, and 30 points after 16 games. That's quite impressive. 18 goals conceded is, like we mentioned, indeed not that not bad. That's very very decent result. And yeah, indeed, only the goal scoring, still a little bit more needed maybe, but yeah, I'm in the last month or so, it definitely, they scored just about enough to win all their games, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Vrancken being kind of quite happy at St Truiden, and it's probably worth reminding those who might not know this, but St Truiden is actually his hometown club. So that maybe goes some way to kind of explaining that as well. And of course, he spent the majority of his playing career at St Truiden as well. He was there 7 years, I think. 97 to 2004. And also Vrancken has this rather amusing stat that I like to remind people of when talking about him, that he's only been allowed to manage clubs that he's played for so far in his career. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up next, but he's definitely very happy there. And you mentioned that this kind of, a side that you would expect maybe to be mid-table, the St Truidens of this world, the Mechlins, the clubs that he has actually done kind of quite well at. It's interesting because he's done less well at what are perceived to be bigger clubs. We must mention, of course, he went within minutes of winning the title at Genk, and he will hold on to that, or maybe not, regardless of how that went. But yeah, I think he's a coach who does do very well with clubs that have different expectations on them as well, because he's quite, I think he's quite a pragmatic coach. His sides do generally play kind of quite entertaining football and are good to watch, but he's not dogmatic about tactics. I don't think he obviously has a preferred way of playing, but he responds to what's going on around him, I think, kind of quite effectively. And if you look at what he's done there at St Truiden, he's managed to eliminate a lot of the bad mistakes that were going on for the majority of last season, kind of before he came in. The thing that made them really frail and wrecked their confidence, he's eliminated that, and he's made them generally more stable and effective kind of across the pitch, because there's more balance now as well, as you were kind of getting at as well. I think their defending seems to be more solid. And they, offensively, they're being reasonably effective at the moment. So they're kind of quite competitive at both ends. So it comes back to this balance thing. And it's interesting because you've got this blend of being entertaining but resilient at the same time. I mean, you look at the side that started this weekend, and it's pretty much a full strength one at the moment. Kukubo and goal, who's been pretty solid for the most part, and then that back line, like you say, no massive names in there, but again, really solid. Muslio, Taniguchi, Van Elden, and Van Vessemal sitting in front of them. You had two defensive midfielders to provide a bit of extra screening, and Sasako and Yamamoto, who've both been generally quite good as well. And then offensively, you've got Sabawi in one wing, Muya, who we'll all remember from Antwerp, who's been an interesting loan signing and a reasonably effective one on the other wing. Ito sitting in the hole as well, contributing some goals, and then Goto's come in on loan, as we know, from Anderlecht, and has really slotted in there really, really comfortably. Probably not surprising, a Japanese player coming in doing well into a club that, obviously has a big Japanese cultural element to it, but that's a really well balanced side that is performing, at a reasonably high level just now, and they're just more competitive generally. The fact they came from behind as well this weekend to win was quite impressive. They're taking their opportunities, which is good to see. And Vranken's pragmatism, as I was saying, he likes a possession-based game, but he's not wedded to that. He's not dogmatic. He does like quite a high defensive line, to kind of compress the play. We saw a lot of that during his time at Mechelen, and that's what makes him so entertaining as well. They do create a lot of opportunities. Looking for those rapid counters when you win the possession high up. Looking to exploit width and overloads on the flanks. So I think he's just got this, he prefers this balance tactically, which just seems to work quite well in Belgian football. And it's probably why he's been pretty successful at, the majority of clubs he's been at that wouldn't be considered one of the big boys. And it's certainly no surprise that he's doing quite well at St Truiden now, in a way similar to, that really enjoyable and successful period he had at Mechelen as well. I think it's just an environment that's entirely different. It's quite interesting, isn't it, Joris? Because when he left Mechelen, he was quite honest about saying he fancied taking a step up and challenging himself a little bit. And he went off and he did that with Genk and Ghent, and neither of those experiences ultimately, worked out very well for him. And he's come back to a club of, a similar level to, the Mechelens of this world, and he really does kind of do well in those environments, and I admire that. He's gone away and tested himself, and he's come back and actually proved that he is a good coach. There's no shame in going to a bigger club and it not working out, really.
Yeah, and to point out, okay, with Genk, of course, he could indeed have, well, probably should, admittedly, have won that title. But even there, being a bigger club, that was a season that nobody expected much of Genk. There basically was a fire sale before the start of that season, and he did with what he had. So even there, you could argue that was from an underdog position, even though Genk being a bigger club, generally speaking, of course, that still remains to be seen. Of course, we can't do anything. We can't look in the future if that had something to do with maybe why second season it went worse, and why at Ghent, for example, also there was a lot of pressure from the start that they maybe didn't work out. But I'm presuming he might get another chance at a bigger club at some point. But at Sint Truiden, I think he's indeed very happy, and they are very happy with what he's bringing to them at the moment as well. And yeah, that's really he is having an interesting career indeed so far. Yeah, and let's see. I do believe he's indeed really. He has that set up for the underdog, though. In the anyway, which doesn't necessarily mean he can't succeed at a top club, but I think he has a really good approach of like implementing some simple steps to improve a squad drastically. Like he revives Sint Truiden now. Really, they were a tough watch for most of last season. And yeah, that has completely changed. And indeed, like this counter approach as well, for fast counters, and then making a few players very important. So that people management, at least on the individual level, how it works on the team level, that's seems to be working here as well. But that seems to work. Does it also work with at top clubs? That's of course a thing, speculation as well here. But like with some more players that are yeah that are expecting more maybe, or like are expected to bring more, that's and whether we can manage them, keep them in line, that's something to be seen. Like I mentioned, Lapoussin is now also in the B squad. That more or less would be the kind of player that you would be. Can he work with such kind of players? He seems to be able to work without anyway, and make the squad work even without. That's already a really impressive step, of course. But yeah, yeah, at a top club you have more characters like that, I guess, or potentially at least. And can he manage those? That's maybe the big question mark at the moment still, together with the pressure in general at the top club, of course. But yeah, that's inevitable too. Then we will have to probably, I'm assuming, wait and see in the far future. But for Sintrade and for himself, it probably is good that he stays there for a little while. And yeah, then they can see what happens. But yeah, a really impressive run of form and of the season so far as well. Yeah.
I suppose the obvious question really is, and we have to ask this because the listeners will be wondering this themselves. Can they sustain this form? I mean, obviously, there's a long way to go yet. There's the whole second half of the season, and we've seen sides have very good first halves of the season and then go off a cliff. So we know the way that this can go. Yeah, can they sustain this? To what extent they can sustain it, and can they realistically do that one thing that I think nobody thought they would do, and that's push for a playoff one spot? Because we were talking about one of his former clubs, very briefly as well, Mechelen. They're confounding a lot of expectations at the moment as well. They've had a good first half of the season for the most part, and are sitting in a quite surprising position at the moment. And I suppose lots of people are looking at both Mechelen and Sint Truiden and wondering whether they can finally do something, particularly in Mechelen's case, which they've never achieved, to secure a playoff one spot, whether they can sustain that enough to kind of squeak in there, or whether they're simply having a good first half to the season. Injuries obviously play a big factor in these things as well, don't they?
Yes, definitely. That plays a big factor in like the data. Like we already have touched a little bit on it. Seems to indicate that Sint-Truiden are a bit more comfortable in that, and should be able to, based on that, able to sustain this a little bit more. But we will find out soon as well. Of course, the schedule is not so super easy on them for this month, for December, going into the winter break, which is actually a winter break this time. It's not always the case in Belgian football, but the 4 league games they still have are at home against Club Brugge, away at Anderlecht, the other side that we will talk about soon a little bit as well, with 4 wins in a row. Um, aforementioned Mechelen as well, so a bit of a battle of the revelations of so far. and away at Standard, which is never an easy game for any side, of course. But yeah, they are sitting in comparison to Mechelen. Sint Truiden are of course also sitting a bit more comfortably, 6 points ahead of them, and like I mentioned, 8 points clear of falling out of the Champions playoffs. That's of course still possible, still relatively early days, but at this stage of the season, they are, if they don't fall off a cliff, they should be able to maintain that top 6 spot. And yeah, what else would be possible? At the moment it's looking very rosy, and like there were only 2 points of second place even, but yeah. But that's the next month might tell us a little bit more. Oh, yeah, I also forgot to mention that's actually the first game they have, which is tomorrow in the cup, an away game against Antwerp. Yeah, again, a deep an away game that you don't really, uh, yeah, would like, not a place you like to go to necessarily, as a Sint Truiden. This season is is slightly different, but again, we will also touch once again on Antwerp in a little bit in a little while during this episode. Of course, things have changed a little bit there, and also their confidence has gotten a small boost this weekend with that win over Club Brugge, of course.
Yep, so St Truiden obviously one of the big winners of the weekend because of the way other results worked out. And the other side, who arguably the biggest winners of the weekend, are of course Anderlecht. In third now, only 5 points off top. Obviously, club losing to Antwerp, and then Anderlecht managing to win the Brussels derby. Um, really narrowed the gap at the top. And it's probably too early to ask the question about whether we have a 3-horse race. We resisted that before the international break. And we'll probably resist it for a bit longer, but some people are starting to kind of wonder that now. And the interesting thing about Anderlecht, I suppose, is they are playing quite well at the moment. Obviously, this weekend, they just look better in Union, I think. Union looked not off it, but just, didn't have as much I think energy and zip about them as Anderlecht did. Whether that's got anything to do with their exertions, obviously in Europe, where they had a good win as well in Turkey against Galatasaray, have anything to do with it? In a way, it doesn't really matter. You have to have the squad depth and quality to handle these things. But yeah, they just seemed like they wanted it a little bit more. And they just look more competitive offensively, I think, Joris. They've got kind of more options, I suppose. It's interesting to hear Besnik Hazy talking about this over the last week. He didn't mention any names, but, we all know he's talking about Hazard and Bertuccini, Svetkovic and Angulo, who's in pretty good form at the moment. And I think Besnik Kazidis is just feeling a bit more comfortable about the options open to him. And they're quietly going about their business and just, I think, really enjoying being able to be competitive for once.
Well, I was actually going to look at a different part of the site. That's a reason for their success. None of the aforementioned players have actually scored in the last 3 games, which they all won, for example, but they haven't conceded a goal because they all won them 1-0. And I do think that's the main thing, actually, at the back and like the organization. Not only the back, but the organization. They're a difficult team to score against. That's one thing you have to give to Besnik Hazy. We all, nobody expected him to be here still at this point of the season, and I mean, given the way things are going, he will be there for a while longer, for sure, even if some things might go wrong in the next few weeks. If they can, that's a big question as well, of course. Can they maintain their form? Yeah, with these narrow wins, it's not that they're really blowing away opponents either. But of course, in those 3-1-0s, there's our wins against Club Brugge and against Union. Of course, two sides they have a very bad history in especially the last few seasons. And last season couldn't win or against any of those sides, so that they are already broken some of their bogey sides for the last few seasons. Maybe this week in the cup against Genk, they could break another side's streak against them, or maybe not the streak because Genk have lost it before, or it drop points before against them, but at least in the last few seasons, the record has really turned in Genk's favor in that fixture, while it used to be differently. And that's, of course, one of the reasons why they have been away for so long. Yeah, it will again with them. It's interesting to see how it will go. So 4 wins in a row, 5 with the cup included. So definitely in form, not conceding many goals. I believe they even have 8 clean sheets already this season. So that's half of their league games. So yeah, in the league only they are is what the stats entail. That's a lot, and that could win you championships, of course. In a way, defense wins your championship. But yeah, that which is unlikely. And then like with them, I guess like last weekend against Union, like we would have expected that Marco Cana and Kylian Sardella would be the central defenders in the first Anderlecht side in years to beat Union. Yeah, and like they're just generally having a really good season. So I actually want to give out a little shout out to Kada, not for player of the week, that will come later on, and it's not from this game even in my case, but that just for the season he's having in the comeback season, the comeback kids here, really having a really decent season. And yeah, okay, not everything was perfect. Also last weekend against Union, I guess there was one chance where Promise David could create it against him by just running really fast and being big and force him, outmuscle him. But yeah, in general, he's really been performing really well. Also, the rest of the game last weekend, Union were not able to create a lot. Admittedly, also because they were quite poor. That's a caveat as well. Still for that, of course, they won against Club Brugge in the game after they faced Barcelona and had a really good game in the Champions League. Union now, same story. So like somehow, I guess it plays a role, maybe more mentally even than physically for those sides. Plus, they know that it's only for 1.5 points at the end of the day, and we're not at playoff times yet. And presumably, all sides will not be playing in Europe at that point anymore. But hopefully they are, of course. Hopefully all sides are still there, but realistically speaking, that's most likely not going to be the case. So then they will be yeah, they will be more more in that they are more used to playing more games in a short time span, which is during the playoffs the same rhythm as well, and they can only focus on the league then. Yeah, and, well, maybe also on the cup, but that's most likely only going to be one game for whoever would make a cup final. But yeah, just the caveat of the opponents having a lesser having a fuller schedule so far. A bit of the same story as Genk had last season, where they did not have European football, which is still a bit of a shame, of course, a very very big shame for both Belgian football and Anderlecht and Besnik Hazi, as well as a manager, that they failed to reach any group stage this season. We all could have would have welcomed it a lot, but for the coefficient, given also the setup of those leagues, they could have gone quite far, especially if they could have kept their defense as tight as they are at the moment. But yeah, they didn't create as much against Union. They also against La Louvière. I haven't watched the game, only heard through the grapevine things, but they didn't create as much either. So like it's not that they're blowing away opponents in attack, but defensively they're being stable. Yeah, is it sustainable or not? That's the big question mark, together with the caveats I gave as well already from the opponent side. But from Anderlecht side, no. It could, of course, also it can also still go both ways, of course. And maybe they can get a bit more attractive again and score and indeed score some more goals as well, and everything gets even better. Or will it? I would not be fully surprised, like if at some point they will have a bad, and it could be starting this week as well. Already, they would fall back a little and drop a few points in a few weeks in a row against opponents you would not expect. And one other caveat, which also again it can go. It means two things, but they had all the top sides at home so far. So they have all the away fixtures in Genk, in Union, Club, in Bruges, and in some others as well. I can see in Gent as well, I believe. They have them. They will have to go for away games, which is always a different story as well. Of course, on the other hand, it also means they have quite some winnable games at home as well, which could bring you very far against what you would what on paper are weaker sides, let's say, with all due respect. So yeah, if they already would win all of those, then even if they would drop points here and there against the top sides, that would be um, well, that would be not too bad. But of course, it if they can get some results in those away games, then they really are there. And like a massive turnaround from the stats of last season, as you can make up out of all of this. And yeah, very very interesting to see. And like I believe there was also were also 7 players that came through Neerpede or through the futures, at least maybe not Neerpede, but at least futures, finishing the game last weekend. So that's yeah, that's also something that they will be proud of as well, of course. And that's yeah, the signs, the stars are aligning a little bit at Anderlecht. Yeah, will they
Yeah,
move on or not?
I think that win should give them a lot of confidence, because when we look at the Brussels derby, Union have been so dominant in this particular fixture for what feels like forever. I mean, I think that was only Anderlecht's second win in the last 17 or something like that, which is just, I mean, we've talked about these stats before actually with Brussels derbies, but you know they absolutely aren't in Anderlecht's favour. So you know there's lots of reasons for them to enjoy this weekend. So yeah, that's the kind of two big winners of the weekend, really, in terms of the overall results. Obviously, Anderlecht and Sint Truiden that we talked about. Another side who we have mentioned briefly, who will be hoping to become winners again in some form, are Antwerp. They've had a coaching change since we were last together, which will shock nobody. Stef Wils has ultimately, as we know, paid the price for a disastrous first half of the season, and it kind of felt like his dismissal was coming for absolutely ages, but it has happened now. He's been replaced by another Dutch coach. Um, Again, probably not surprisingly when you join the dots here and we remind everybody who Antwerp's sporting director is, probably an individual who has one of the best black books for contacts as far as the Eredivisie is concerned, and Dutch football full stop, in Mark Overmars. But yeah, he's brought in Joseph Oosting, who wasn't in a job actually, which probably explains one of the reasons why this happened quite quickly within 3 or 4 days. He was officially unveiled today. He had his press conference today. He was in the stands at the weekend to watch Faris Haroun overseeing that victory over Club at the Ambridal. He met with the press today, Joseph Oosting, and told us all that Mark Overmars actually phoned him the same day that Stef Wils was sacked, to kind of have a chat with him. So obviously there's somebody they've been considering for a while. Keen to get your thoughts on this one, Joris, because you know there was a lot of people I saw on social media talking about this, kind of didn't really understand it, but when you delve a bit deeper into Joseph Oosting's background and his personality and who he is as a coach, you can kind of see why he might very well be quite a reasonable fit for Antwerp at the moment. More on that if you go and read my Substack as well, which I know all you listeners will have done. I've written a more detailed piece on Joseph Oosting's background and why he's obviously been attractive to Antwerp. But yeah, what do you make of this appointment, Joris?
I'm not sure if I should say uninspiring because of this, indeed, because of all the things you said about the Overmars and his Dutch black book or Rolodex or anything that whatever he would use for this. Well, we at Ajax he didn't keep any records. That's one of the blames he had. So probably something very close to him, his phone most likely. But yeah, that's definitely. An appointment to look out for. I'm interested. With Dutch coaches in Belgium, it's always a bit of the question mark: are they going to be too naively playing or and like doing well for us at the start, maybe bringing us a bit of fresh air, and then they get found out. But okay, that's something we will have to find out in the future anyway. I know at Twente, where Oosting was active last, now he actually got some critics for, I believe, for actually adapting his playing style and making a bit more building in a bit more defensive stability, which unfortunately didn't completely work out in the end either. But at least he tried that, so that could be a good sign for my previous comment already. I also saw him still. He had a busy weekend last week, despite not being not a manager at Antwerp yet, because I saw he was also at the stands in Zwolle, I believe it was, where his son plays and where his son actually scored on Friday. And then he also went to Bruges, indeed, on Sunday. Of course, there's some time in between and before then, officially starting his managerial career in Antwerp. Yesterday, I believe, and then today the press conference. Indeed, he was out of a job, so that's of course that happens with managers, and indeed it must have been easier to bring him in on short notice. And that will have played a role. He's been doing all right in the Eredivisie until now, but can he also bring it in a completely different league, despite the proximity and similar language, at least same language officially, but similar language, but a different culture nonetheless in Belgium. Overmars, of course, did himself, and they did become champion with Van Bommel, another Dutch manager, of course. But that's most likely, let's say, even if he would do well, most likely not something that will happen this season. Also, given the squad that he has to deal with, at least now the first month. But I'm assuming after winter, it's not going to get as much better. We all know there's not that much money to play around with at the moment. Anyway, also Vincent Janssen being out as well. Like they had to face. I guess Club Brugge was already out, but he will be out for a bit longer as well. Of course, despite him not being at the levels that he came into Antwerp. Anymore. He's still a very important figure, I'm sure, also in the dressing room, that they will miss for that, and Hosting will have to deal with. But it does, of course, come off the back of it does come after like this miraculous win. Maybe you could say, maybe it's too strong of a word, but a win nobody expected nonetheless against Club Brugge in the form Antwerp are in. At least Club Brugge themselves have been winning games, have not been impressive this season either yet. So in that sense, it was possible, but they actually had more kind of one of their better games of the seasons with quite some chances. But I will kind of maybe already. Well, except if you want to talk a bit more about Oosting, I might dive into my player of the week because he actually comes from Antwerp.
Well, we might as well do that. Let's segue to that because you've given yourself the perfect segue there. Who is your player of the week?
It's an unlikely one because I do think, especially Brendan has been saying he's garbage, or maybe I'm confusing again. But it's Kiki Kouyaté, who had a good game. I don't think he's having a good season, but he had a really good game against Club Brugge. He was blocking a lot of shots, had a lot of last ditch clearances on the line, or at least blocking shots indeed that might have gone in otherwise. Being a second goalkeeper on the pitch this time. And was everywhere where he needed to be. Of course, they kept the clean sheet. That's not only thanks to him, but he played a large role in this. In this game, I do think for this game, I believe he does deserve indeed my player of the week. There's also one player I would have mentioned otherwise, but I know my own rules I put in the beginning of the season, so I'm not going to mention the player from my own side. Think or the side I support that I that I would have picked otherwise, but I think everyone can imagine that nonetheless.
I was just about to say, I think we've all got a very good idea who that particular player might be this week. My player of the week this week is I've gone for Ral's goalkeeper, Marcus Piano. Who probably is one of the best goalkeepers in the league so far this season. He's having a very interesting season, I think, attracting the interest of lots of people at the moment, reportedly. One of whom is Anderlecht, by the way. They're big admirers of him. A certain Silvio Proto, obviously looking after goalkeeping matters at Lotto Park these days, and obviously he has a relationship with previous relationship with Ral. So, if you follow the dots here, in the relationship pathways, you probably wouldn't be surprised to kind of hear that. But yeah, he's having a really interesting season, and if he keeps playing the way that he is, it'd be very difficult to see him staying at Ral for kind of too much longer. I think he's been a big part of their, I think it'd be fair to say reasonable success so far. A lot of people had Ral down as almost certain relegation candidates at the start of the season, and they've proved a lot of people wrong. They've adapted quickly after a slightly rocky start, and I'm sure we'll talk about them again soon as well. Did you want to tell everybody about Ben's player of the week?
Yeah, Ben has now quickly confided in me, and he said that Caressas is his player of the week. So I will leave it at that. But
fancy that.
What a coincidence, of course. No, all jokes aside, but it would have been a bit silly to not have mentioned him by name after circling about him. That would have been my player of the week. Other player of the week candidate, as you know, I always try mention a few. Kouyaté was my decisive choice for sure. But Caressas definitely deserved the shout as well. This guy is by Ben now.
Yeah, he absolutely did. He had a very good weekend, actually, and that's a nice way of getting around that. We should remind everybody this is a very, very busy week for fixtures because we've got 2 or 3 days of Belgian Cup action coming up over the next few days. We've got Beerschot against Ral and Dender against Standard, which is actually tonight as of recording. So they are ongoing. And then for the rest of the week, we've got Cercle against Ghent, Leuven against Club, Antwerp and Sint Truiden, Union and Zulte Waregem, Genk and Anderlecht, which is probably the big tie of the round. I think the one that everyone's looking at as being the tasty one. They're probably going to go and watch. And the other tie is Charleroi against Mechelen. So they'll be taking place over the next 2 or 3 days. In the round of 16. So there's a lot going on there. We probably should touch on the CPL as well. Challenger Pro League, Joris, has reached match day 15. What happened? Well, Beerschot beat RFC Liège 3-0. Eupen lost 2-1 to Lommel. Lokeren and Kortrijk finished 1 each. Kortrijk dropping points, not harming them too much at the moment. Liers beat Anderlecht Futures 1-0. Frank Baran, now led by the very familiar Yves van der Heijen, he's back in a hot seat somewhere. Yves Frank Baran beat Molenbeek 3-1. Patro Eisden beat Jong Gent 2-1. Jong Genk lost 4-3 to Olympic Charleroi, and Serang beat Club Next 1-0. So I suppose the big talking points really since we were last together with the Challenger Pro League are Yves is back, obviously back in the dugout. Frank Baran dispensing with Igor Di Camargo. Things weren't quite working out to everyone's satisfaction there. And before we knew where we were, no real whispers about this, Yves was back in the dugout. A very well-known face in Belgian football. And, they've had 2 wins on the bounce, Frank Baran, since he's come in. So I suppose they can't complain. Obviously, Beveren weren't playing this weekend, so are still top. But Kortrijk losing a little bit of ground. Probably worth mentioning Beerschot as well, 3 wins in the bounce, and they've really got themselves into kind of the promotion conversation more generally now, haven't they?
Yeah, for sure. Let's start with that last part. Kortrijk not damaging themselves. Well, they could have gone top, of course, because Beveren had dropped points in the week prior. I guess that was also before already during our break, so after last time we talked. But yeah, Beerschot are now back really into contention with only 3 points between them and Beveren in first place. First two places are important, of course, here. But yeah, they really picked themselves up, and here we can really say, I guess, unlike in the Jupiler Pro League, in Challengers Pro League, we can really say it's a three-horse race. And yeah, in that it would be surprising if someone else would still get into that. But yeah, and that could maybe change also my feeling about whoever finishes last in the Jupiler Pro League. The chances there against one of those sides, they're all three quite decent sides. Whether they're good enough for the whole season in Jupiler Pro League, that's maybe another topic. But I do feel like all three of them have could give a good fight over one game at least to many of the Pro League sides. Like Beerschot actually have proven already in the Cup as well, being the only one still surviving there so far. That might end tonight, but yeah, so far everything is still going well for them. But yeah, things are going well there, and then Frambarret indeed picking up 2 wins now on the bounce after that managerial change, and not too far off of the well all, closer to a promotion playoff spot now, I guess, than to a relegation, even. And so that's how fast things can go. Was this just a shock effect or not? That's something we will have to see and find out. But yeah, definitely something worth mentioning. Yeah, one small thing. I know I've been a little bit more Genk minded this week, but also young Genk, a bit shameful, giving away a 3-1 lead against Olympique Charleroi, who had only scored 6 times before this weekend. Now almost doubling their scoreline. A deserved victory, by the way, though. So it's that maybe that's the most worrying part. Even at 3-1, that was a bit flattering for Genk. I've watched parts of this game. But the main thing also maybe also being in that game, not a result, but a horrific injury for an Olympique Charleroi player, if I'm not mistaken, Ebassi. I might be wrong with the naming, I might have to quickly check that.
Yeah, while you're checking that, out, I'm glad you mentioned Olympic Charleroi because they do seem to be finding their feet now in the sense that they've got themselves into a position where we went for weeks wondering whether they would win a game all season or get close to that to having won a few now and got themselves into a position where it's looking by their standards anyway much better. Obviously, Club Next remain rooted to the bottom of the table and are the only side across the top two divisions to remain winless. Even Dender have managed to kind of get that over the line now. There was the running joke we had about who would win a game first, whether it would be Dender or Olympic Charleroi, but we know that the Club Next are, slightly inexplicably struggling more than they should be for some of the talent that they have in their squad. Something for Joris de Rock to continue struggling with. Very, very interesting. That I think to kind of see how that pans out. Did you? Yes, go for it.
Yes, it's Kenny Beisa. So yeah, all the best to him for sure, because that really looked terrible. He had to be carried off of the pitch. That's never a good sign. And yeah, on there, it's not a good segue now to talk to easy segue to talk about general sportive stuff, I guess. But yeah, indeed, Charleroi and Dender more or less, Olympique Charleroi and Dender more or less in a similar position, picked up, I believe, the same amount of points as well by now, but also in with a fighting chance of survival in their respective divisions for sure. So this could, Will it be too late or not? Will have been too late that they started picking up form or not? That's we cannot predict yet. But they're still in a bad position, but not it's not as hopeless as it used to be only a few weeks back.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely worth highlighting that both Olympic Charleroi and Dender's form has improved quite a bit. Particularly Denders, I think, although we're jumping back up a division, it's worth mentioning those that keep as close an eye on the detail as we do. Will have noticed that Dender have picked up 5 points in the last 9, which is definitely an improvement. No doubt about it. Before we go, it's probably worth mentioning that this week sees the World Cup group stage draw as well in a few days. On Friday in Washington, a certain Gianni Infantino and the president of a certain country will be pulling some balls, and we will know the Red Devils group stage opponents. Belgium will be in pot 1 for the draw, Joris. There's some pretty big hitters in that pot, as you would imagine, as well, which is probably the good news because it means a lot of these sides will be avoided until a bit later. But we know that the Netherlands, Portugal, Brazil, England, France, Argentina, and Spain are in that pot, along with Belgium. But the hosts are also in pot 1 by virtue of being the hosts. So that's obviously Canada, Mexico, and the USA. And we'll also find out as well whereabouts Belgium are going to be, going, where they're going to be based, certainly for their group stage games, whether it's Canada, Mexico, or the USA. Are you hoping for anyone in particular, Joris, or is it just a case of let's see what comes and we'll deal with it after Friday?
I'll say the latter, but you can most likely find out in the Athletic in a little bit what my hopes were for this, because I've been asked to have a little preview for that from Belgium's perspective. I don't know what they will use of it, of course, yet, so that's something else. But otherwise, we will get back to that when we know the draw next week as well, and I can tell you a bit more. I can tell you that in my actual hopes there is some history in politics involved and as well. Yeah, more on that next week. Let's say.
That's a nice little spoiler for everybody about Joris's upcoming piece for the Athletic. On Belgium, I kind of hope they get quite a tough draw, if I'm honest, Joris, because I think that probably would be the best thing. I really wouldn't want a draw where you go, yeah, I think this is a great draw. I would actually quite like to see them get a couple of tough sides, because in that scenario going into a group, essentially what you have to do, I think these groups where you feel you should come through it strongly are always the trickiest ones. And actually, I think it means you have to go up a couple of gears earlier in the group stage, having cruising through a group and then meeting a much tougher side in the knockout game is never really ideal. So I would quite like to see them get a reasonably tough draw, because I think, looking at the qualification campaign, which was pretty uninspiring for the most part, I think it would be good for them to, get a bit of a test in the group stage in order to kind of hit a certain level early, because I think that's what I think they need from what I've seen anyway. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens come Friday.
I fully agree with that. So that I definitely can give away. Of course, well, I can give away anything I want, but I would have actually liked to be in pot 2, but just for that same reason, that you would have a strong opponent if it was not one of the hosts, of course. But even they are at a reasonably good level, for sure. But I do believe in pot 2 and pot 3, there are, the differences between sides are very big, so you could still get into a really tough group. But I would indeed hope for a relatively tough draw for Belgium, to get into a groove. Indeed, also knowing that not that many sides fall off after the group stages as well. So even if you don't get into a first place, that and even not in the second place, it's possible to advance. And then the real tournament only starts from what we are known for. The format that we've known is only starting from the knockout phases this time. It will be a new experience anyway, so it will be interesting to see where that goes. But yeah, I would also like some stronger opposition already in the first already in the group stage.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. We don't have much longer to wait now, and I'm sure we'll come back to this next week once we know the exact nature of the opposition and where we're going to be playing as well. All the more importantly for those who are going to be going out and looking at flights after, well, come this weekend.
No, no. Well, also very important for the ones that are not, but for the playing times that are, of course, heavily influenced by the location because of the time differences as well. So, like, I'm more interested actually in the time zones and when at which time they will be played. I believe there's a few slots already settled, but it's not defined yet who is gonna be where. And some of them are like 7 p.m. I guess, and 7 in the morning, which is like okay. But then, of course, everything else is in between, and that you would like to pick one or two games sometimes, and let's hope we don't get. I believe there's a slot at 4 a.m. Let's try to avoid that as much
Yeah,
as possible.
it is going to be a bit of a logistical nightmare. Let's just keep our fingers and toes crossed that we're lucky with the way that the draw goes. I won't start those conversation about the good old days when World Cups were just in one country and it was all logistically kind of nice and tidy for that reason. Yeah, we're in this new age of craziness where we decide to have World Cups across 3 separate countries, which does have its pluses, but I think there are more negatives with it than there are pluses on
Well,
the whole. But we'll see where we go. Yeah,
to be fair, there was already a World Cup in the United States on its own already as well. So and there is already the time zones. I do believe there's a little extra now, but actually not that much because of the two other countries. So yeah, even if it would be in one country, there are time zones differences, of course, that are difficult. We had also, obviously, in Russia as well. That was also a topic. Yeah,
yeah.
that's
Some countries are just really, really big, and Belgium isn't one of them, which is one of
no,
the beautiful things about it.
yeah. We never host a World Cup for some reason.
And there's a great idea. We'll come back to that one. We'll come back to that one. You heard it here first. We're starting that campaign. Might take us a while, but Joris is shaking his head. You can't see this, but he's shaking his head, and yeah.
I would not throw money on that myself, to be honest. That's already a very Belgian reaction, I guess, as well. But
Yeah, the campaign starts here. You heard it here from us first. It was always going to come from the BFP. So there we have it, folks. The week in Belgian football is another week in the can. Thanks for joining me, Joris. We'll do it all again next week. If you really like what we're doing here, of course, you can leave us a little donation at our Buy Me a Coffee. That goes a little way to helping us meet some of our production costs. And it would be brilliant if you'd leave us a little review on your podcast platform of choice as well. It always helps new listeners find the BFP and what we're up to here. Have a brilliant week, everybody, whatever you're up to, and you'll hear from us all again very soon next week on another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.